A single dad was asleep in seat 8A. When the captain asked if any combat pilots were on board, seat 8A held a man who looked ordinary enough to be invisible. The kind of passenger most people glanced past without a second thought. He sat by the window, head tilted slightly to one side, eyes closed. One arm bent awkwardly behind his neck as if sleep had caught him mid-adjustment. His name was Daniel Mercer, though no one on the plane knew it, and even fewer knew the weight he carried every day since his wife's death 3 years earlier. Being a single father had reshaped his life into a careful routine of school lunches, late-night homework, and quiet promises whispered to his sleeping daughter that he would always be there. This flight was supposed to be simple. Just another trip home after visiting his late wife's parents. Another chapter in the quiet survival he had mastered. Exhaustion clung to him more tightly than the seatbelt across his waist. And for the first time in days, sleep took him without warning. Around him, the aircraft hummed steadily. The cabin filled with a low murmur of conversations, rustling magazines, and the soft clink of a flight attendant adjusting a cart. The woman seated beside him noticed his stillness, the rise and fall of his chest, and the faint crease of worry that never fully left his brow, even in rest. But she looked away, respecting the privacy of a stranger's fatigue. High above the clouds, the plane cut through open sky, and for a while, everything felt ordinary, predictable, safe. Then the first jolt came, not violent, but wrong. A subtle shudder rippled through the cabin, just enough for conversations to pause and heads to turn. The seatbelt sign chimed on, and a practiced calm filled the space as flight attendants moved with rehearsed confidence, offering reassuring smiles. Daniel stirred, but didn't wake. His mind still lost in the half-dream where his daughter laughed in the backyard, where life hadn't yet hardened him into vigilance. Minutes later, another tremor followed. Stronger this time, accompanied by an unfamiliar pitch in the engine's tone. A sound most passengers couldn't identify but instinctively feared. Anxiety crept into the cabin like a rising tide. Hands tightened on armrests. Whispered questions floated between strangers, and the illusion of routine began to crack. Up front, behind the closed cockpit door, decisions were being made quickly, voices low but urgent, instruments flashing information that left no room for doubt. The captain, a veteran himself, understood the situation with chilling clarity. An unexpected mechanical failure had compromised key systems, and while the aircraft was still controllable, the margin for error was shrinking with every mile. Protocol demanded calm, but experience demanded something, Mara. Contingency beyond checklists and manuals. He remembered stories from old training days, tales of unlikely heroes and unplanned moments where skill rose from anonymity. After a brief exchange with his first officer, he made a decision that would ripple through the cabin like a shockwave. The intercom crackled to life, and the soft background noise faded as every passenger leaned in, hearts pounding. The captain's voice was steady, controlled, but carried an edge that seasoned travelers recognized instantly. He explained there was a technical issue, that the crew was handling it, and that there was no immediate danger. Words chosen carefully to balance honesty with reassurance. Then he paused, a fraction too long to go unnoticed, and continued with a request that seemed almost surreal. He asked if there were any combat pilots on board, anyone with experience flying high-performance aircraft under pressure, and requested that they identify themselves to the nearest flight attendant. A stunned silence followed, heavy and disbelieving. This was the kind of announcement people heard about in stories, not on routine commercial flights. Passengers exchanged looks, some nervous, some skeptical, others suddenly aware of how fragile the thin metal tube around them truly was. The woman beside Daniel felt a chill run through her, her eyes darting toward the sleeping man and then back to the aisle. as if answers might appear there. Daniel, however, slept on, unaware that the world around him had shifted. His past, the one he rarely spoke about, the one he believed belonged to another lifetime, waited quietly beneath his closed eyes. Years earlier, before fatherhood, before loss carved him hollow and strong at the same time, he had been something else entirely. He had flown machines that defied gravity and logic, trained to remain calm when alarms screamed and the margin between control and catastrophe vanished. He had learned to trust instinct sharpened by repetition, to act not out of fear, but responsibility. That man felt distant now, buried beneath school schedules and grief, but he was still there, waiting. As the seconds stretched, no one stood. A few passengers shifted uncomfortably, the reality of the request sinking in. Somewhere toward the back, a man cleared his throat and shook his head as if to say he was no help. The cabin grew heavier with each unanswered moment. A flight attendant moved down the aisle, eyes searching faces, hope flickering and fading with every row. When she reached row 8, she hesitated. Noticing Daniel's posture, the unconscious ease with which he occupied space, something subtly different that years of experience taught her to recognize, even if she couldn't name it. She paused, then gently touched his arm, unsure why she felt compelled to do so. Daniel stirred, blinking as sleep loosened its grip, the remnants of a dream dissolving into the unfamiliar tension of the cabin. He looked around, confusion giving way to alertness as he registered the expressions, the silence, the weight of expectation hanging in the air. Before he could ask what was wrong, the captain's voice echoed again faintly from the intercom. The request repeated, urgency no longer fully masked. In that moment, Daniel felt the past rise within him like a tide he had spent years holding back. He thought of his daughter, of the promise he made every night, of the lives surrounding him in this metal vessel suspended between earth and sky. He hadn't planned to wake into this, hadn't planned to be needed again in that way, but life rarely asked permission. As his gaze met the flight attendant's, something unspoken passed between them, and the ordinary man in seat 8A began to remember exactly who he was, even as the plane continued forward, carrying them all toward a moment that would change everything. Daniel's eyes opened fully now. The lingering fog of sleep burned away by the tension that filled the cabin. When he rose from seat 8A, he did so quietly, without drama, as if standing up were the most natural thing in the world. Yet every step he took down the aisle carried a gravity the passengers could feel. He followed the flight attendant toward the cockpit, his mind already shifting into a familiar, disciplined rhythm. Fear was present, but it no longer led. Training had taken the front seat. Inside the cockpit, the captain wasted no time. Words were exchanged quickly, efficiently, stripped of anything unnecessary. Daniel listened, studied the instruments, and understood the situation almost instantly. The aircraft's automated systems were compromised, leaving the crew to manage a complex balance, manually while turbulence threatened to worsen. Daniel's voice was calm when he spoke, offering an approach shaped by years of flying under conditions where failure was expected, not feared. The captain saw it then, not just confidence. But Claritin nodded, allowing Daniel to assist. As Daniel placed his hands on the controls, muscle memory awakened, steady and precise. The plane responded in subtle ways, a language he still understood fluently. Outside, the sky remained indifferent. But inside the cockpit, every decision mattered. In the cabin, passengers felt the shift. The violent tremors softened into manageable movement, and the sense of helplessness began to loosen its grip. Some closed their eyes in silent prayer, others held hands, all of them unknowingly placing their trust in a man they had passed without notice moments earlier. Daniel guided the aircraft through a controlled descent, coordinating with the crew and air traffic control, adjusting constantly as conditions changed. Each second demanded focus, and he gave it without hesitation, thinking not of medals or recognition, but of a small girl waiting for him at home. When the runway lights finally appeared through the cockpit window, a collective breath seemed to rise from the plane itself. The landing was firm but true, the wheels meeting the ground with a force that signaled survival rather than danger. Applause erupted the instant the plane slowed, raw and emotional, filling the cabin with relief. Daniel stepped back, letting the captain reclaim full control, his role complete. There were quiet words of thanks, hands clasped briefly in understanding. And then he returned to his seat as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. The woman beside him looked at him with new eyes, her earlier detachment replaced by gratitude she couldn't fully express. Daniel simply nodded, exhaustion settling back into his bones. When the doors opened and passengers filed out, some stopped to thank him, others offered silent acknowledgement, knowing that some moments transcended words. Later, walking through the terminal, Daniel checked his phone and saw a message from his daughter asking when he would be home. He smiled softly and replied that he was safe and on his way. As he stepped outside, the sky stretched wide above him. No longer a battlefield, but a reminder. He had tried to leave that part of himself behind, but now he understood it was never something to escape. It was something to carry quietly until the moment it was needed most.